What's going on, Space Monkeys? Welcome to Political Fight Club. I'm Robert Durden. Dreamland again today. We're going to start on page 222. The chapter's called Took Over the OxyContin Belt. And I apologize, I'm raspy once again. This flu season has been something else. This is like the third time I've been somewhat sick in like 3 months. So it's been a doozy. Everyone I know is sick now. So I apologize. We'll get through this as painlessly as we can. Columbus, Ohio. Forget you have children. This advice was given to Mario, an illegal immigrant, by his new boss from Jalisco, Nayarit. Mario was preparing for what turned out to be a short career as a dispatcher for black tar heroin cell in Columbus, Ohio, a few years after the man brought the drug there. Forget that people may do to your kids what you're doing to the children of others, his new boss told him in a restaurant one day. Otherwise you won't sleep. And, he added, don't let the clients die. Care for them. They're giving you money. Mario had worked for several years as a mechanic in Portland, Oregon. Many of his clients then were heroin runners in Portland from Jalisco, Nayarit, or villages nearby. He sold them 2 or 3 cars a week. They offered him work in their networks, which he declined at first. Then a series of financial problems made him reconsider. So one summer he accepted a job with a Jalisco man he called his boss, and they drove to Columbus. I spoke some English. I was clean. I had an ID, good credit to rent an apartment. I rented one there. They paid the rent, he told me. He earned $500 a week as a dispatcher, taking telephone orders from a roster of users. The network's sales grew to more than $2,000 a day. His boss returned to Nayarit and waited for workers like Mario to send the money home. Mario woke in his bare apartment each morning, took phone calls all day, directed the drivers, but rarely socialized with them. He hated needles, but he lived far from the effects of what he was selling. I never saw anyone inject himself, he said. I never saw people get sick from lack of dope. I never knew how people got sick. I never knew anything of the people who died. Had I known, I'd have left it. The drugs arrived regularly from Nayarit. It did not come in truckloads as he imagined it would, like on those television shows. Rather, it came with couriers carrying a kilo or 2 at a time. Ant-like, he thought. His boss shipped it in from Nayarit to Pomona, California, where it was cut up and sent in smaller quantities to Columbus and other cities. The boss hired workers from Jalisco, whose families he knew, so he knew the network would send its profits back to him every month. His boss himself had once worked as a runner in another network before going out on his own. He knew all the dealers and drivers in Columbus. Mario made trips with his boss to Nashville and Charlotte to arrange supply deals with other networks. He dispatched drivers around Columbus for 4 months until the day the police barged in and he went to prison. Nayarit doesn't have a cartel, he said. It's people acting as individuals who are doing it on their own, micro-entrepreneurs. They're always looking for where there's more money, places where there's no competition. There are thousands of small networks. Anyone can be a boss of a network. Because of that, the Jalisco boys had succeeded by the mid-2000s in avoiding virtually every town Americans traditionally associate with heroin. No Jalisco boy ventured to Baltimore or Philly or Detroit. No Nayarit sugarcane farm boy was going to shoot it out with armed heroin gangs in NYC. They didn't have to. Mid-sized metro areas had legions of new young customers and no worrisome gangs or mafias. The Jalisco boys' ranchero farm boy roots, an unbeatable retail system, led them to areas of least resistance, now tenderized to heroin by the widespread prescribing of illegal opiate painkillers. They went, as one cop I met said, and took over the OxyContin belt in America. The Jalisco boys, in fact, were hardly the country's only heroin dealers. Detroit, Baltimore, Philly, and New York had drug gangs who controlled the trade for years. Nor were the boys the only Mexicans trafficking in black tar heroin. Northern California was controlled by traffickers from the Tierra Caliente, a humid and notoriously violent part of West Central Mexico. No Jalisco boy ever stepped foot in Northern California. Sinaloans controlled the Chicago and the Atlanta markets, both of which were major distribution hubs. The boys for sure weren't going there. Yet all these gangs were known for their violence and gunplay. To me, that made them almost passé, like Wild West gunslingers. None of them controlled the drug from its production to Mexico to its sale by the tenth of a gram on streets across the U.S. The Jalisco Boys did. They were dope traffickers for a new age when marketing is king and even people are brands. Ain't that the truth? Purdue branded OxyContin as the convenient solution to disruptive chronic pain patients. The Jalisco Boys branded their system, the safe and reliable delivery of balloons containing heroin of standardized weight and potency. The addict's convenient everyday solution, the one to start with and stay with. Like Purdue, but quite unlike traditional heroin dealers, the Jalisco Boys didn't sit around waiting for customers to come to them. They targeted new ones using come-ons and price breaks. They followed up sales to good clients with phone calls that amounted to customer satisfaction surveys. Was the dope good? Was the driver polite? Drivers would travel across town to sell a $15 balloon. Addicts learned to play one crew off of another. The other guy was giving me 7 balloons for $100. You're only giving me 6. The effort was to keep the addict not only using, but drumming up more customers to get bigger discounts. Meanwhile, Jalisco dealers were constantly monitoring good customers for signs that any of them were trying to quit. Those addicts got a phone call, then a driver plying them with free dope. One Albuquerque addict told me this story. He called his Jalisco dealer, whom he considered a friend, to say he was going into rehab. Good idea, the dealer said. This stuff's killing you. An hour later, the dealer was at the addict's door with free heroin. Now that you're quitting, the dealer said, here's a going away present as a way of saying thanks for your business. The addict kept on using. A woman in Columbus told me her dealer welcomed her home from jail with a care package of several balloons of tar heroin to get her using again. The more astute among the Jalisco traffickers realized that they owed much of their success to prescription opiates. A few had heard of OxyContin. Most of the Jalisco boys I interviewed, though, had not. They were oblivious. They knew nothing of the history of heroin in America. They didn't know how their customers came to the drug, that they were now selling to a historically new clientele, customers no one expected to be using the drug. And why would they? They spoke no English and holed up in Spartan apartments when they weren't driving, and thus had little feel for the U.S. They weren't sociologists. Most weren't about to converse with the addicts about how they got into dope. To them, the less face time with addicts, the better. They were quick hit artists. They were selling well and didn't care why. But their delivery system and cold-blooded marketing, combined with an enormous and growing clientele newly addicted to pills, were the reasons for their success. By the 2000s, these ranchero farm boys from a county of just 45,000 people in a state most Americans couldn't find on a map had become the most prolific single confederation of heroin traffickers in the United States, aggressively seeking new markets while supplying dope in at least 17 states, including unexpected places where heroin was all but unknown before they showed up. So we'll continue with the final convenience on page 226 next time, guys. Hope you're enjoying the book. Keep fighting that good fight.